Hello, Steve White, Trekboy89 for Steve Arts89. I have a love-hate relationship with Robert Meyer Burnett. I used to like his show, but I have a lot of issues with him now and the company he keeps and how he justifies or explains that. But he was talking about Star Trek on a podcast, Alive. I still listen to his show. And he brought up something that was annoying, and other things he's brought up a few times that I find frustrating. I just want to comment on. The main thing that I've noticed, because now I don't like the Kurtzman era of Star Trek. There are a lot of issues with it, but a lot of people who complain about it and hate the show, those are their own issues. They are racist, homophobic, or misogynist. All these things that they have problems with the show come from their own issues. A lot of people, not everyone. There are people that have legitimate problems with the show's treatment of canon and the characters and all that. And that's legitimate, and, that's something I criticise and, should be criticised. But an extension of that, which I find not sort of legitimate, is a lot of people get angry at the shows for contradicting their head canon and things they believe to be right or true or are canon that actually aren't. If it's not specifically shown or stated in the original series, the animated series, or the movies, or Next Generation, that whole era, then it doesn't exist in canon, and you can't be wrong about it. And some things that Robert Meyer Burnett kept going on about were all in that sort of realm where it's like, well, this is what I thought about the character, so it should be like this, and they're not doing that, so they're wrong and stupid. And that's not always the case. You may not respect their choices. You may think they may have made better choices or done things better, but they're not actually wrong. And there's a big difference there between bad taste and, wrong and violating canon, so forth. Like, one example he gives is Spock and music. In an episode of Strange New Worlds, Mbenga gives Spock an instrument to play to help him calm himself or soothe himself when he's going through some sort of trauma. And later on in the series, we see that he plays musical instruments, and he actually can read music. Now, nothing in the original series or the movies establishes that he learnt music or was some sort of musician before the original series. There's nothing to contradict the idea that a human gave him an instrument and it was something that he hadn't explored on Vulcan, that it was something that was valued on Vulcan. Robert Meyer Burnett's assumption that music was important or valuable or valued on Vulcan, and that Spock would have to be some sort of prodigy, because that's what he projects on Spock, because he makes Spock into this superhero. And the Star Trek characters were aspirational and a little bigger than life, but they're not superheroes. They're not perfect, and to project that onto them and then say, well, if you don't depict that character in a superhuman way like I think they are, then you're wrong. So there's nothing wrong with them having Mbenga give Spock an instrument, and then that is what starts Spock to learn music, and then he does master music, and he can just read sheet music off a random harpsichord and play it in the original series. So things like that are a little maddening, because they're projecting onto the character, they're creating their own headcanon, and they're attacking writers for doing something different, and for fans liking what they're doing and not having a problem with them not contradicting their headcanon that's in their head. It's so narcissistic and arrogant. And Robert Meyer Burnett does that a lot. And a lot of his arguments against Star Trek are based in that. And like I said, unless it's stated or shown in the series, it's not canon, they're not contradicting it. So they have every right to do that. And you may think they're making stupid choices, and a lot of the time they are, but they're still not violating canon, and they're not contradicting things. So that's a whole issue. And another issue they were talking about was the use of pop culture in Star Trek. In the original Star Trek, they always played it safe and timeless by using things like Shakespeare and classic literature, because those things are never really going to age. The fact they're still around, we know they're still going to be around in like another 500 years. So that makes some sense. If you just use contemporary things, you're pandering to people in the moment, and those things are probably not going to age well, and you have no idea how they're going to last. But the idea that our popular culture wouldn't last and wouldn't be considered classic or looked at in the future is kind of I don't really see that as a sound like idea. It's like, well, why wouldn't we be listening to 80s music we still listen to 80s music now in 2025. Why wouldn't some, humans in the future like 80s music? So why couldn't they have that play at a reception or be used in the destruction of an alien race, and their ships in a battle? I mean, you are running the risk if you're doing like right now contemporary, like if they have Sabrina Carpenter appear on Discovery and perform their latest song, which is what they wanted them to do on Enterprise. The producers wanted them to have like a holodeck bar, like on Charmed, and they'd have contemporary people come on do contemporary. That's begging for redundancy and like being aging right away. But pulling from things from the 60s and 70s, like James Bond, like they did in Deep Space Nine, pulling on 80s music in the JJ's films, I don't have a problem with that, because that stuff is still around. If they put a Madonna song in the middle of Strange New Worlds, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because, we're still going to be talking about Madonna in 300 years. Like we are still talking about Marilyn Monroe 60 years after she died. I do think pop culture will exist in the future, and having characters refer to it is not a bad thing, but having just contemporary things we don't know are going to last, yeah. So there's a line there I'll give him, that just dealing with contemporary things is dangerous. But pop culture, things that have proven themselves to have resonance, there's really no problem with putting those things in. He was like carrying on about how they're doing that, and like I said, I can see the flaws and potential danger in that, because these things haven't been around for hundreds of years like Shakespeare, but I think there's a good chance they will be around. And individuals are all going to look at things differently. You're going to have characters who like Shakespeare and characters who like, I don't know, Charlie's Angels, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something like far enough back that's popular, but, pop culture, but not really old. But not going to fade in the next 2 years, because it's like of the moment. So there's a couple of things that I had to sort of say, because it really drives me nuts that he has all these assumptions about who Spock is, and that he can't be this. Because the other thing about Spock is saying how Spock is the best of the best. He's the best Vulcan, he's best everything, and the idea of them making him anything less than that, I'm like, we don't know that about Spock. Where was it ever stated he was the best of the best? We know he's brilliant in human terms by comparison, as humans observing him as a Vulcan. Yeah, but we don't know. I mean, we know from the animated series that he struggled with the other students and they bullied him and he fought back and he couldn't control his emotions. I don't see him doing very well in school. I don't see him doing very well in at the academy. I mean, in the film, he was accepted and he didn't want to participate. The idea that he just failed, he couldn't cut it, and that he dropped out and went to Starfleet because he couldn't make it as a Vulcan. He thought he could make it as a human. He thought it'd be more accepted in Starfleet with the diversity and everything, as opposed, because they could accept a Vulcan or a part Vulcan, whereas the Vulcans couldn't accept anything other than pure Vulcanism. I can understand that. So this idea that, in Rob Meyer Burnett's headcanon, Spock was the best of the best, and anything less than that is an insult to the character. We don't know that about him. We know his father was disappointed in him, made his peace with it, and there's a lot of room there, a lot of wiggle room for things. And the idea also about him having like a learning disorder, considering he's a product of biracial, what do you call aliens? Mating. But interspecies, there could be issues like that. And that's not unrealistic. And the fact that he still gets past that and is still brilliant doesn't make him not Spock, and doesn't like that. That's not that isn't possible. Now the way they play it, like he's some sort of like a special needs kid who needs help, and that he's sort of this pet they're helping to train. Sort of the way they treat Spock in the show is a bit condescending. I'll give them that. But the ideas around that and behind that aren't breaking canon and aren't necessarily bad, and could have been done a lot better and a lot more interesting with other writers, But they still could have been explored, and there's no reason why they shouldn't have been. The idea that Spock is this perfect superhero that was the best, better than all the Vulcans, it's like the same Mary Sue arguments they have with Michael Burnham could be applied to Spock. Like, why do you think he would be the best Vulcan at the Academy? and better than all the rest, and he left and went to Starfleet because he was better than all the Vulcans and wanted to be Starfleet because it's better. That's what you're projecting. That's nothing that's stated in any of the shows or any of the movies about his character. He could very well have struggled and went to Starfleet out of necessity or desperation. He could have gone there having given up on Vulcan and being hardened, wanting to embrace his emotions and be human. And by the time we see him 7-10 years later in the original series, he's found a bit more of a balance. But in the series, you do see that snobbery and that Spock playing up the superiority of Vulcans. Is that what he really believed, or is that him just messing with McCoy? So just either way, I just wanted to comment on those couple of things that annoyed me. The idea that modern Star Trek is wrong for contradicting your headcanon and your personal beliefs is just arrogance and narcissism. If they're contradicting things that are actually established in the show, yes, and they've done that a bunch of times. So they are at fault for a bunch of things. But not everything people are attacking the shows for are warranted. And obviously the people attacking them over race and diversity and wokeism, when the original Star Trek was woke and basically created it in modern pop culture TV, is ridiculous. So there's a lot of... I will not often defend modern Star Trek, but it doesn't deserve all the attacks from all the people that it gets, because some of what it's doing is fine and in line with what other Star Treks have done since Gene Roddenberry created the original Star Trek, including The Next Generation, which he created. But yeah, a lot of it's bad. But I'm not going to trash it all just because of tribalism, or just because personally that's how I feel. I will defend the show if there's something that's being unfairly criticised for. So I just wanted to do a little video talking about that, and now it's 12 minutes. But yeah, that just really annoyed me. I was just watching a video and I'm like, really, Rob? Oh, and another thing, since I'm already at 12 minutes, the idea that he assumed because there were things in the original series that he didn't know of, that it had to be an alternative reality. Because there was an episode where there was a space shuttle and Gary Seven did something that we didn't see happen in the 60s. How do we know it did happen? It wasn't just covered up. How do we know it it wasn't one of those things that, the idea that episode couldn't have happened, so therefore we must be in a whole new reality. My understanding was Star Trek is our future, and what happened in the 60s, that when they went back to Earth those couple of times, did happen, and they were somehow explained, and it doesn't take too much of a stretch to do that. So the idea that Strange New Worlds is moving the this is problematic, moving the eugenics wars, because it hasn't happened as far as we know. We already had Greg Cox do 2 or 3 novels explaining how everything that happened, that was stated that happened in Space Seed, did happen in our history, and it was just worked around and covered up. My understanding is he did that. I still haven't read the book, so I can't be sure he actually successfully did that. But as far as I'm concerned, Star Trek is our future, and that's what they've stated that's what Paramount has stated, what's been stated in advertising and promotion, that it's science future, not science fiction. It's our future. And yes, there are some things, if you go back into contemporary times and then those things don't happen, then that's a problem, and they did that with Voyager as well. So, and you either just acknowledge that the way, you sort of watch Superman and you're aware that Superman hasn't, fought any giant monsters in our city recently and had, thousands killed as buildings are thrown apart by, Kryptonian gods. But you still understand that that's our world they're in, when they're in it, when you go and see that film. So just the idea that Star Trek is an alternate timeline because of that Gary Seven episode, assumptions he made like that he reasoned as a child, that are not based on anything other than his assumptions. And then he uses that against these creators. And another thing that they talk about is the whole Joss Whedon universe, the elements that they use from Joss Whedon's shows and contemporary shows in Star Trek, and how wrong that is. That's coming from an arrogant place, an elite place of the idea that science fiction comes from fiction, fiction only, and if you don't understand fiction and the great literature of science fiction, then you can't understand or make or appreciate modern science fiction. So that's just elitism and stupid, and there's no reason why the sort of elements that worked in Buffy and Angel can't be applied to Star Trek and modern shows, so long as they still are science fiction and not science fantasy. Because the problem that they make in modern Star Trek is they make Star Trek into science fantasy and just plain fantasy and magic, and that doesn't work in Star Trek. So that worked in Buffy, and there are elements that worked in Buffy that can be applied to Star Trek and science fiction, but they're not doing that right. So there's some valid criticism there, but there's also just a splash over of, well, this element doesn't work, so the whole thing is wrong because I don't like it, basically. So there's a lot of that, and I really just wanted to do a little video countering some of that, because as much as I have issues with modern Star Trek, I will defend it when people are attacking it for no reason, which a lot of people do.